Exploring the bizarre. Your e-ticket ride into the world of the paranormal. Strap yourself in as we traverse the universe exploring the unexplained. UFOs, ghosts, lost worlds, cryptozoology, as well as other dimensions. It's time to take back the night. Now, your electrifying hosts of Exploring the Bizarre, Timothy Beckley and Tim Swartz.
It's witchcraft, wicked witchcraft, and I know that it's taboo, but you arouse a need in me. Let me see here. Where is my cauldron? Oh, here it is. Just set a little fire and throw a little incense and some oil in there, and maybe, God knows, one of our enemies, and we'll be all set to take back the night, Tim. You know, I'm sitting here in a very chilly New York because spring has not sprung yet, with a copy of the Gypsy Witch spell book in my hand. Ritualistic secrets of sorcery, shamanism, witchcraft, magic, and fortune telling. This is the book that gives you curious old Italian secrets, the magic virtues of garlic, calling up the spirits of earth and air, and egg lore and egg proverbs, and a cure to protect animals. But gosh, I guess this would be great if we lived on a farm, Tim, wouldn't you say?
Well, a lot of that stuff, was very popular here in the central part of the United States, especially in the 19th and early 20th century. It was called powwow magic. Yeah,
and hexing, right?
Right, yeah.
In fact, do you have a hex sign on your house?
No. But we do have probably maybe about 30 miles away from where we live, several Amish communities, and they they have them painted on their barns, even though I don't think that they paint them for that reason. I think they just paint it because it looks nice. But that's what they originated from. They were hex signs to help the crops and stop the evil whatevers from harming their livestock.
In fact, I believe this book, we added a section on the black pullet, which is how to turn your hen's eggs into gold.
Possibly. It's been a while since that book.
With the royalties from your books, you don't need to do that anymore, right?
Well, I was just thinking though, the black pullet though was a like a pamphlet that, gosh, I think it was originally written like in the 18th century.
Yeah. Well, so was this Gypsy Witch spell book was done. I don't know what 1930 or 1940, and we added the black pullet to it because people had actually requested it.
Oh yeah. Well, it contained all kinds of hex signs and how to draw them and their proper use and things like that. So yeah, there's a long history of that.
Well, we don't have to do that tonight. We don't have to go out to Amish country because we've got two fascinating guests on. And one of them is over there in the UK, our old friend Ben Porter, and he's going to tell us all about the last witch that was prosecuted and persecuted, and the UK. You think that witchcraft went out with the Salem witch trials, but nay, not true, Tim.
Yeah, it's a very interesting case, and also with us tonight, by the way, is Jack Kenna, and he's a member of the paranormal team Spirits, SPIRITS of New England, San Diego Ghost Hunters, and Extreme Paranormal Encounters Response Team.
Well, we've got a doozy of a show. Why don't you give the listeners a little bit of background on Ben, if they haven't heard him on our show before? He's a one of the top conspiracy researchers and ufologists in England, and he's got a really great a YouTube channel. If he hasn't been taken off the air.
No, I don't think he's been taken off the air just yet. Well, this is like maybe
knowing YouTube these days, that'll come next.
Yeah, well, boy, that's true. Let's. I'm sure that our video producer Peter would have a few things to say about that.
Oh boy, well, they demonetized me after the first show. They're going to make sure that I don't make a dime on this. But we don't do it for the love of money. We do it for the love of the paranormal.
That's right. The love of the subject. Well, and now I think this is probably Ben's, maybe fourth or fifth visit to exploring the bizarre.
Well, we keep them. I was going to say we keep them locked up in the asylum, but I mean we keep them we keep them locked up in the closet over here, and we once in a while we unlock the rusty old door and let them out into the KCOR living room area, and we sit around and chat up a storm and hustle up some ghosts and goblins and Bigfoot and the UFOs that go bump in the night.
Well, I should mention that Ben Jones is a researcher, blogger, and filmmaker on controversial subjects, and his blog website is HPANWO, which stands for Hospital Porters Against the New World Order. That sounds like it sounds almost like a Doctor Who episode there.
Well, we found out early on, in case people here on this side of the pond don't know what a porter is, it would be similar to an orderly. And Ben has started a UFO group made up of porters. But I think last time we talked to him, he had 2 members. Did you ever get any more members there, Ben?
Unfortunately, not yet. Sorry, Tim. I haven't had any. But I'm still working on it. I'm accepting applicants. Anyone wants to join?
I make frequent visits to the hospital here. In fact, I was over at NYU today. Maybe I'll try to scurry up a couple of members on this side of the Atlantic, and we can all have a very good show together. I mean, that would be fun. I know that there have been numerous UFO sightings over the years over hospitals. I guess you must have collected some of those.
Well, I have heard of a few. Yeah, I mean, for hospitals. It's for ghosts and things like that are more common in hospitals. I mean, I think more sightings there than anywhere, actually. There's a chap called Dr. Mitchell Gibson, who is in your city, actually, New York.
Is that right? And how have I missed him walking down the street?
You may want to have heard of him. He's a doctor, and he often reported seeing strange things. Like, for example, he would be doing resuscitation on a patient in the resuscitation area, and then the patient wouldn't make it. He'd walk out into the corridor, and he'd see the guy there. He'd actually encounter the person he was actually working on. So this is the spirit of the person who just departed, which is very odd.
That he would make an excellent guest if he were still working in the hospital, and even if he's not. Well, I do remember one case up in Canada where a couple of nurses were standing by the window, and they saw this dome-shaped object with a couple of lit up portholes come right alongside the window, and I guess they closed the curtain real fast, I suppose. But what I wanted to get into tonight, we started off with the singing, or I did singing, and I use that in quotes. A couple of lines there from Wicked Witchcraft, and there've been a lot of music. There's been a lot of music devoted to magic and Howling Wolf, and some of these Louis Prima and Keely Spell. I mean, I'm sure you can name a few of your favorite songs that revolve around the witchcraft theme. But what we wanted to get into, I know you've just done a video presentation on this very controversial lady, Helen Duncan, who was a spirit medium in 1944 in Great Britain, and she was actually convicted and sent to prison under the Witchcraft Act of 1735.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about Helen. How did she get into? How did she step into a pile of shit, so to speak? I mean, that seems awful drastic. I mean, witches haven't been, burnt at the stake or actually hung here in the United States. People think that witches were burnt at the stake in Salem, but no, they were actually hung. Several of them, I believe. How did she get all wrapped up into this?
Well, it must have been as confusing for her as it was for everyone else, because this is a situation that combines the paranormal with conspiracies and government cover-ups. So it was of great interest to me, because these are two of my very pet interests, so to speak. It was a terrible injustice that was done, and that's something I always like to fight back against whenever I hear something like that happening. But Helen Duncan she was born in 1897 in Callander, which is in Scotland. And from a very young age, it was clear she had some kind of supernatural ability. She used to go to trance in the middle of school, and she used to yell out portents of doom and things like that, which terrified her classmates.
Now, would we classify her as a physical medium or a trance medium or a channeler?
Oh, she was a manifestation medium. I mean, this is something that developed through the course of her life. But she was definitely, she went through several different phases, it seems. But I mean, she wasn't, I mean, in those days, she was, luckily, if she'd lived a couple of hundred years earlier, she'd end up like the Salem witches. She'd been strung up in a tree or something, But luckily, she lived at a time where, well, the worst she got was a few strange looks. But she was known as Hellish Nell. That was her nickname. And she made a living out of her mediumship when she was old enough. When she got married, she had some children. And she was in very poor health. Her and her husband were both quite ill. So she took to performing on stage in various places. And she very quickly became very famous. And that's what she did. She went from spiritualist churches to various seances, as mediums do today. She traveled around and performed and became very successful. And
well, spiritualism is much bigger in your side of the world than it is here. We subscribe and advertise to the Psychic News. And in the back of the magazine, every month they publish a list of all the spiritualist churches, and some of them seem to be very active. And we don't have much of that here anymore. We do have a couple of spiritualist camps, like Camp Chesterfield, and there's another one. What's the one out, Tim, in your area?
Lilydale.
Yeah.
Oh. So is Camp Chesterfield still? So is Camp Chesterfield still going? That's quite a.
Yeah. And we have down Casadega down in Florida, where if you want to go to Sweat, you go down to the Andrew Jackson building, which is where they still have their services on the weekend. And there's no air conditioning, and there's the old pews in there. And I think maybe one or two fans that hum away. And now this was quite a few years ago. Maybe it could have even been, modernized since then. But I remember it being, it's like in the swampish area. I mean, it's like very rural and very kind of difficult to get to unless you know where you're going. But it's a challenge and certainly worth visiting. I know I miss going there. You can get some good readings from some really fantastic spiritualists. But okay, so Helen was a manifesting medium. Did she manifest like ectoplasm and all?
Yes, she's actually, people have described her. Alan Crossley, for example, who was her biographer, described her as the most powerful manifestation medium he'd ever heard of. I mean, she used to create ectoplasm, which used to turn into forms, into recognizable forms, including people who would take on the appearance of living people. I mean, and this is what very often happened during these manifestation seances.
It wasn't cheesecloth.
No, that's there was this whole cheesecloth thing goes to a study that was done on Helen in 1930 by Harry Price and the London Spiritualist Alliance. Yeah, this was basically fake. The whole study was fake. The reason it was fake is because there was it was basically a huge argument broke up between the London Spiritualist Alliance, which is today called the College of Psychic Studies in London, and Harry Price, who was this lone maverick. Helen actually decided to subject herself to scientific tests, but she signed an exclusivity contract with the LSA, which she broke because Harry Price approached her privately and asked her to do sittings for him. And there was a massive trouble. There was a massive ruckus between various people, and Helen was caught in the middle. So basically, they both decided to publish, but they were in a kind of a rush to publish as quickly as possible. Now, the whole idea of the cheesecloth thing, this was quite ludicrous when you think about it, that Helen Duncan was actually swallowing cheesecloth, which is a textile, and Price claims she managed to swallow a piece of cheesecloth that was 6 feet square in her stomach, which she then regurgitated. In other words, she threw up without using her hands, and managed to create these, because she was tied to a chair. She was actually strapped down to a chair tied very firmly by her ankles and wrists to a chair, and to actually create these strange shapes in the air, which some people describe as people they knew. They recognized them, and one lady said, "Oh, it was my mother. I recognized the mole on her nose."
Ooh. Right.
So this, I mean, Price claims to have actually collected a sample of this, but I wonder why he didn't get a bigger bit or something. I wonder why people didn't cash her out before. It's all a bit, it was all a bit bizarre, but that's just all nonsense. I mean, there's Alan Golding of the Magic Circle actually looked into this, and at the time when Helen Duncan was in London in 1930, and he published his own report on this and said how ridiculous it was.
We had over here back in the 1850s and 60s the Davenport brothers. In fact, I recently did a book on their career called the Dark Seance, and they were actually they were in a spiritualist cabinet. The door was locked, their hands were tied, and all these musical instruments would float out of the top of the cabinet and kind of float or teleport around the room, and music would be played, and then when the doors were open, the tambourine and the trumpet and whatever else would come crashing back into the box where they were located. But they were totally they were driven out of town. They were beaten up a couple of times. They had a run for their lives. And we understand that one woman was so shocked at their performance that she actually fell out of the balcony in a hall in Philadelphia and was badly, seriously hurt. So there have been some, and I use this perhaps in quotes, great mediums over the years, and they have been controversial figures. I kind of always liked studying them and reading up on them. Ben, they kind of remind me of the UFO contactees of the 1950s, and some of the phenomena, as I'm sure you will agree, is quite similar.
Yeah, and there's a bit of overlap actually, because people who have ET contact often you do exhibit kind of these abilities, the abilities which you might call mediumistic powers. There's a lot of connection there, I think.
But how did she become the most wanted witch in the UK? I mean, what was that all about?
Well, basically, everything went wrong when World War II began in 1939. There was this obviously everything changed then because there's a lot of uncertainty and a lot of fear in the country. We look back at World War II, we see it as a historical event. It's almost like a story. We know how it begins, we know how it ends. But to be in the middle of it and not know what was going to happen must have been very, very different, especially early on in the war when we were suffering the Blitz. So Germany was actually bombing the country, actually bombing the cities, and we had to go down to shelters at night and things like that. And we had the possibility of an invasion. We lost 300,000 troops. Not as many as in the Great War, but still it's a large number of people who were killed. We had 60,000 killed in the Blitz. And Helen was... so Helen became hot property, in a sense. Now, what's happening is it all got tied up in a situation to do with espionage, because the number of secrets, the government wanted to keep a number of secrets because of the war, which always happens, of course, in warfare. And they were worried that Helen Duncan might be able to actually give these secrets out to people, and inevitably to the enemy, through the testimony of the dead. You always hear this. If you ever watch a spy novel or read a spy novel or watch a spy movie, you've heard the phrase, we had to kill him because he knew too much. But what do you do when you can't silence someone, even by killing them?
Well, that sounds very similar to some of the mysterious deaths that are going on in the UK right now.
Well, these things don't change. I mean, the political situation comes and goes, but the same methods often appear. And I mean, Helen, there's a long story, and I know we're coming up to the break, but Helen Duncan basically was carrying out mediumship demonstrations all up and down the country. I don't know if she ever went abroad, but she was world famous. And there were several occasions, like when some ships were sunk. There's a ship called HMS Hood went down, and a guy. Basically, the intelligence services watching her, the guy called Brigadier Roy Firebrace, who was head of Army intelligence, was actually in the audience at the time when a sailor appeared in ectoplasm in his little square rig. And he said, basically, the ship HMS Hood has gone down. This is an Admiral-class battlecruiser. It was sunk off the Scarpa Flow in the North Sea. And basically, Brigadier Roy Firebrace was astonished. He went back to his office. He phoned up the Admiralty. He says, "What's going on? Have you lost a ship?" And they said, "No, sir, no." But then later on, they called him back and they said, "Oh, yes, we have. HMS Hood went down. HMS Hood went down off Scarpa Flow yesterday." And he said, "Well," and then he managed to find out exactly when it happened. It was just before Helen's séance. So this is really, really worrying.
So now, did they think that she was in collusion with the Nazis?
Not knowingly, no. I mean, it wasn't her fault. I mean,
I realize that, but why would they have come after her and taken her to court and tried to throw her into prison because she had this knowledge?
D-Day. That's the reason. What happened was this all kicked off in 1944. No, because the HMS Hood went down in 1941. There was another event in October where another battleship, HMS Barham, went down. So on both occasions, Helen Duncan managed to inform people. And in the case of HMS Barham, the government actively tried to suppress information from the public because they were worried about morale. They didn't want to tell people because of the effect it might have on them. So, but she then, her guide came forward and says, "I have her officers and men here, newly arrived in the spirit world. They drowned on board the ship in the Mediterranean when she went down." And so this was really worrying, because if our side were watching them, you could bet the enemy was too.
I would guess.
All right, we're going to have to hold it right there, fellas, because we are going to our bottom of the hour break. So we'll be right back on Exploring the Bizarre. So stay tuned.
Lower that anchor.
Now back to Exploring the Bizarre with two of the most electrifying researchers in the paranormal. Your hosts, Timothy Beckley and Tim Swartz.
All right, welcome back to Exploring the Bizarre. I'm Tim Swartz, and we will return to Ben and his story about the medium Helen Duncan in just a bit. But now we want to bring Jack Kennett into the conversation. And Jack, we were talking about Helen Duncan, and really, she was almost at the tail end of the whole spiritualist medium, being able to actually produce apparitions, in the seance room and things like that. Right. And now here we are in the 21st century, and we have available to us just all kinds of just fantastic technology, and things are really quite a bit different compared to how they used to do it, aren't they?
Yeah, it really is. I mean, even with you're talking about spiritual mediums and psychic mediums, stuff like that, which we've branched farther than that actually now with the scientific end of things and what we now call paranormal investigators, who some are psychic mediums or just psychics. And so yeah, it's gone a really kind of different direction, but it's still, at its base, is the psychic mediums.
Right.
We don't really think about that. We don't. Some of us, not myself, but I know some people don't like to think about that. They're just total tech people, and that's okay. And there's nothing wrong with that, And they just, well, you don't want to look at it that end. But with what I do, and really focusing on helping people who are experiencing hauntings and stuff like that. To me, you can't look at the paranormal without realizing it's really about the spiritual. You're talking about a soul, or you're talking about, someone who's passed on, or a demonic or something. It's all spiritual stuff. So no matter what you're trying to prove, or prove for yourself, or trying to capture evidence of the afterlife or whatever with the equipment we're using, you still have to consider what you're really going after here, right? So well,
I know
mediums to work with me, and I do have some abilities myself, and you work with that to try to figure out what's going on and deal with it.
Well, I was just going to say that I know a lot of the of ghost hunters, and I really hate using that term, but paranormal investigators.
That was a TV show, so
Yeah. But it's kind of become synonymous though with it though. I mean, it's like Kleenex and Band-Aids. That's become the name almost. But there are a lot of them, like you said. I mean, they are concentrating almost specifically on the tech, and they have a distrust almost of working with psychics or with somebody who can just go in and they don't require any technology. They can just talk to the spirits on their own, and a lot of them hate that.
Well, I don't know if they so much hate it as they're just trying to separate from it. But the funny thing is, any of these guys you talk to, because I know many of them, and they know me, and they know I use my spiritual end of things, but they will tell you, I ask them, so, well, how do you figure out what's the best place, to check out? Well, I had a really weird feeling in this area, and this spot felt a lot different than this spot. I said, what do you think you're doing? You're using your abilities, whether,
right.
Whether it's just your, not necessarily psychic abilities, but you're using your senses to figure out where to best try to investigate. So you're still, going to that side in order to try to find evidence and capture whatever you're trying to capture to prove the existence of the afterlife. And they don't like to think about that, but but it's like you're still tying it in, boys. You can't get away from it because it's a spiritual realm that we're trying to deal with here. So, Yeah. That's okay. Stick to your equipment, and I do. I use equipment and stuff. I actually try to use less and less of it these days, but I still use it because it can give you a lot of things to work off of and bounce better questions off of when you're investigating if you seem to be getting answers or responses or things like that. So I use the equipment a little bit differently than maybe some people do. I use it kind of just as a guide more than anything else. Take it with a little grain.
I was going through your biography there. I see, though, that this is your mother had, I guess, a number of experiences and told you about them. So, you've been involved in this for quite a long time.
Since I was a kid. I mean, I haven't been investigating since I was a kid. But I've always been involved. My mother always told me about her experience seeing her father after he passed outside their door at their home, which freaked her out. I mean, totally just freaked her out. And but she was there with her father. Her father died of throat cancer, and she was there with her mother taking care of him when it happened. And it was not a pretty scene either. So she, she's very down to earth. My mother was very down to earth, very spiritual person, but not, we're Roman Catholic and all that, but she wasn't, like an extreme Catholic or anything like that, but not an extreme churchgoer or anything like that. But we used to talk about a lot of the spiritual stuff, and her own mother was that way. Talk about the spiritual stuff, and seeing different things. So I think it just actually a very good psychic medium friend of mine told me, she goes, it runs in your family on your mother's side. That's why you have it. I'm like, oh, okay. Because my mother used to predict stuff, and she's like, not predict, but she'd say, I want you to be really careful going out today because something might happen or something's going to happen. Sure enough, I go out that one day, I have a car accident. Nothing bad. I went off the road, but it was the middle of winter and I went off the road. But it's like, damn, Mom, how do you know? She goes, I just knew it. I knew something was going to happen. I could tell. I could sense it. I was like, that mother's sense, I guess, right? So, I always have to laugh a little bit or get a little chuckle when I hear guys saying, "Oh, it's all in the equipment. You got to use the equipment. You just trust the equipment." It's like, yeah, okay, all right, yeah, I know what you're doing though, because I investigate with them. So,
well, now what manifestations? Okay, so you're using the equipment and all. What has actually appeared to you?
Well, I mean, I've just seen shadow figures standing 3 feet from me, but I put the infrared camera up on it. It's not there. Now, I could see that dark shadow figure. That happened on one of the cases. Matter of fact, it's one of the cases that I talk about in my one book, and it was on Haunted Case Files last year too, season 1, in Springfield, Mass. This female, she looked like female shadow figures, just standing at the edge of a couch 3 feet from me, and I'm looking at it, and it didn't frighten me. I don't react that way. I'm looking at it and going, "What the heck?" And I put the camera over on it, and I go, "Son of a bee," because it's not in the camera. It's not showing up on the infrared, and then it fades away. But I captured an EVP. It turned out at that same moment, right after pretty much I said that, saying, "Didn't like me." Female voice says, "Didn't like me." Huh. I think she thought I swore at her.
now, is a shadow person the same as a ghost?
I believe it's a manifestation of whosever soul that is. Yes. So I would say, yeah, it's a ghost, I guess you would say. To me, I don't think of them as like, I usually say spirit or it's a soul. All right. Because it's a soul of an individual. We're people, right? If you believe you have a soul, if you believe in the afterlife, that's what we're talking about, right? Our soul, who we are, right?
Well, now some psychic researchers, believe that some ghosts may be spirits, and others are kind of an impression that's been left in the.
Yeah, that's what I call a. It's a. I know what you're talking about there. It can
a recording.
Yeah. It can build up from different things that happen in that area and whatever. It's like a manifestation of just the energies that have built up in that home over the time or in the location over time, and it kind of takes its own. Like a thought form. Think of it as a thought form. Okay.
Have you had any luck with recording EVPs?
Yeah, we've caught quite a few in many different locations. We've done a lot of cases. So one of my favorite ones was on the USS Constitution that we did for the Navy out in Charlestown, Mass. Old Ironsides. The old, it's still an active Navy ship, and we caught a voice of a young boy, which in the 1800s, they had young boys on these ships, and the guys giving us a tour because we had to have one of the people from the ship with us each night. So the boatswain's mate was with us the second night, and he's talking about what they called the manger area on the ship where they kept live animals, cows, pigs, chickens. He talks about that, and then you hear this young boy's voice, maybe a teenage boy, whatever, go, "And a bear." And you can hear it loud and clear, and it's got a very strong New England accent to it. It says, "And a bear." And when we presented that to the captain and crew, they knew immediately what it was talking about. And we're like, "Well, what are you talking about? We think it says "and a bear," but we didn't know the whole history." He goes, "Commodore Scrappy, the black bear cub they kept on the ship as a mascot in 1932. And if you go to the history on that ship, you'll see it, and there's pictures of that bear there." And we're like, "What?" But the history, if you look at any boys who died on the ship, they all died in the 1800s. There was only 5 that died on the ship. And they were all between the ages of 11 to 14. and one fell from the mast, 2 drowned, 2 died of bilious fever. Right? So one of those boys from the 1800s somehow knew about a bear from 1932. So explain that one to me. Right? So it's really weird, but it's loud and it's clear. And we get quite a few loud and clear EVPs. I mean, Class A. Not always, but I've gotten quite a few over the years where people, even one saying "bless you" to me as I was sneezing at a location. Yeah, and that was at where were we? Up in Dedham, Massachusetts, Fairbanks House in Dedham, Massachusetts. Oh, you guys were talking about hex marks and stuff like that. The house is full of them. They got hex marks all over everything on there for protection and all that. You know, that's a home that was built in 1637. So one of the oldest wooden homes in the United States. So interesting places around here. But yeah, we get a lot of EVPs, a lot of different stuff. It's just, I find it fascinating, you know.
The majority of those EVPs, you don't hear them while they're happening, and you only discover them when you go back later.
Right, and that's the definition of an EVP, electronic voice phenomenon. You only hear it later on when you go back and listen to the recordings. I have heard disembodied voices many times. In fact, one of the best ones I've heard in a long time was last year at an event at Buffalo Central Terminal, where we've got we're bringing a group around just investigating the place at night after the event, and everybody's standing in a semicircle down in what they call the trolley area, and they're asking, "Hey, little boy, do you want to play a game?" There's some supposedly little boy that's there, a boy spirit or whatever, and I'm walking around the outside of the circle as if I say like I'm doing Duck Duck Goose or something, and all of a sudden they ask that question. You hear this loud and clear, this boy's voice saying, "Yeah." And I stop dead in my tracks, and everybody else is standing there, and I go, "Did anybody else just hear that?" They're like, yeah. The funny thing was, 2/3 of the crowd heard it, 1/3 didn't. So that I found that very interesting. It's like, and we're all in the same area, and it was loud, and it was like, so only 2/3 of you, because we talked to him. It's like, I didn't hear it. 2/3 of us heard it, 1/3 didn't. So
have you ever done any research in the stone chambers that dot New England?
No, I haven't. We don't do a lot of outside stuff, or we do some historical locations. Those are places I'd like to go to. Yeah, well,
why I ask that is because we've heard on several occasions that people who have spent the night inside one of these chambers have seen, strange spirit type light manifestations or orbs, and have even heard
go ahead
voices. So I suspect that there must be something
that I do. Some of these clients' homes I experience some really weird stuff. But yeah, those are some places I really would like to check out, too, just out of my own curiosity, But yeah, I just did a case a few weeks ago where I saw, and I knew there was something kind of really negative there. I could just tell by the feel of it. It didn't feel right. And I saw this, went down into the basement where we were going to set up some of our equipment. And I get down to the bottom of the stairs, one of my team members right behind me. All the lights are on, and there's this like dark black figure that looks like I don't know how to describe it, but he looks like a big gingerbread man. Okay, just all rounded, like a human shape.
All I know, if you give me a cup of coffee, he won't be there long.
I went after him, but I couldn't catch him. So I saw it dart away. I was looking straight at it too. It wasn't one of these out of the corner of your eye thing. I was looking straight at this thing, and it shot off. And I went right after it. My fellow investigator was like, "Jack, where the hell are you going?" I said, "I just saw this thing. I got to see where the heck it went." And we go to
it's a remnants of was it Hansel and Gretel?
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. You know what I've heard over the years, and I've heard from other people, and people who have seen demonic type figures, is that's what they say they sometimes will look like because they can't quite take on an actual human shaped form. So, Is that what I saw? Is that what it was? I don't know. I know what I saw, and I know what happened later on in that case. But I've seen some really weird stuff over the years, and I've been told that's because I have some abilities and I'm sensitive to it. So I can take heart to the poor lady there over in England and what they put her through, because, you can talk to people about it, and there's some people who think I'm nuts, and I'm like, look, I work for the Department of Defense. I work in engineering too. So if I'm nuts, we're all in trouble. Some of those systems I work on may not work. I don't know, but that's another thing. So it's just what you experience and what you see and how you approach things. And that's, maybe I take a little bit different perspective than some investigators or ghost hunters or whatever you want to call us these days.
Now, how have your opinions at all changed over the course of your years of investigating the various phenomena?
Yeah. I mean, they have, and if they don't, then you're not really learning anything, right? I mean, if you stick to the opinions you have when you first get into this stuff, or your original theories of things, and you're not learning anything. I have, I think, come to realize that, especially within the paranormal, when you're dealing with different types of spirits or entities or things like that, I think sometimes, very often, what I refer to, or what is called elemental spirits, are mistaken for demonic entities, and there's a difference between them. That's my own theory on things.
Now, how would you describe we're thinking of elementals as being like fairies?
Nah, well, they could be that. I mean, these are things that
garden gnomes and trolls, and
I'm not so much thinking of that aspect of it as more of like the Native American aspect of elemental spirits and what they worship, and because we deal a lot with that on this East Coast over here, especially in the New England area. There's a lot of where the original Indian settlements were and stuff like that. So there's a lot of that. I mean, you could look at it as fairies or gnomes or whatever you want to think of too. But to me, I mean, and if you listen to the Indians themselves talk about their belief systems and stuff like that, these were their gods. And they were created as part of the earth to look over the earth. So they're not necessarily all evil or all negative, but they tend to not necessarily like humans anymore because of what we do to the earth, right? We don't really take good care of it anymore. So they tend to not like us, and if we get into areas where they tend to try to drive us out. They can be threatening typically, but they typically won't try to possess anybody. And I think that's where the difference comes in between what we believe as demonic spirits in this field and what we believe as maybe elemental spirits. Elementals just don't want you around, basically, is what I've come across. And demonic spirits really want to do some harm to people. There's a difference there, So I have some newer theories about things and newer ideas about things than I used to have years ago, And again, I think you guys would say the same thing, right? I mean,
yeah, you bet.
Yeah, because
growing up, we all thought that every single UFO was interplanetary, and now we kind of put that on a scale of 1 to 10, kind of at the bottom of the list.
Yeah. I mean,
unless Bigfoot is piloting the ship, then we give it a little.
If that happens, let my buddy Steve Coles know, the Squatch detective there. I'll let him know that they're piloting the ships now.
We have some cases that there was a case. I think the fellow's name was William Bosco in Michigan or Wisconsin. Back years and years ago, I interviewed him on the telephone, and he claimed that he had seen on a rather desolate length of road a globe-shaped object that was transparent so that he could see inside. Yeah. And there at the controls was some big, hairy dude. I don't know. I mean, you back in those days, you heard the story and you say, well, this guy must have been, smoking his own weed or something like that. But maybe Bigfoot was smoking his weed. You can't really tell there. Oh, yeah, Tim, you've investigated the other Tim. You've investigated some pretty bizarre cases in all in your life, your career.
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, and I was just wanting to ask though, when you bring up the whole, like demon aspect when it, when it comes to this, investigation. I mean, it's something that I was thinking, you really do need to, tread lightly, because I've seen so many, people, and and maybe it's just, I don't know, I think they let their own belief systems, get in the way. But, they'll go into a house and almost immediately like, oh yeah, you've got demons in here. Oh, they're running up, they're in your closet, they're eating your food in your refrigerator. And, and then, the people in the house are scared
to death.
Shitless. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
No, I don't been doing that. That's for sure. Matter of fact, I find very few demonic cases. I mean, they're rare. I mean, they're rare.
But I mean, some of these people, I mean, it's just like, every creak, it's a demon, for sure, and then, sometimes I think then that, whatever, is going on in the house is like, oh, well, you think we're demons? Okay, we're demons. And then start, like playing that game, so to speak.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I agree with that. And I get clients all the time. I'm possessed. No, I actually don't. I have to talk them down from it, because it's like, well, number one, if you really were possessed, you wouldn't be telling me, because you wouldn't know you were, and they're like, what? Yeah. The demons don't let you know they've possessed you. Okay. It just doesn't work that way. They're out there for a reason. They're really trying to just, and it gets weird because, they have bad things happen in their life. So they want to blame it on something. And you become almost like a psychologist to them, really. And I don't mind doing that, but I point them in the correct direction too. It's like, well, you've got other things going on. I think you need to talk to a professional, but they often have a haunting going on too. I found that. I mean, we have 11-page form. We have people fill out before we go in and investigate. So they have to tell us everything, and you'd be surprised. People really want your help. They have that form back to you within an hour, and there's a lot of questions on that form. And then the other ones who are like, oh yeah, I'll get to it. You never hear from them again, because that's one thing we do. It's like, I'm not going to investigate until I get that form, because I'm not going to drive 4 or 5 hours at my expense to help you unless you tell me what's really going on, So, it works, But yeah, people start to believe everything's paranormal when not everything is, Well, you got to work into that.
I could see, though, that filling out that form, if a person is really serious and really think that something bizarre is going in their house, they'll be willing, to take the time to fill out that.
I think that's a tremendous idea.
Yeah, we've been doing it for a long time, and it wasn't the form wasn't my idea. It came from another group who was on TV. And
all right,
it was a idea. We'll leave it at that. I see.
Okay, well, we have our own form that we have to go to right now. Form of a break on Exploring the Bizarre. So stay tuned. We'll be back.
Exploring the Bizarre. Your e-ticket ride into the world of the paranormal. Strap yourself in as we traverse the universe, exploring the unexplained. UFOs, ghosts, lost worlds, cryptozoology, as well as other dimensions. It's time to take back the night. Now, your electrifying hosts of Exploring the Bizarre, Timothy Beckley and Tim Swartz.
Welcome back to the second hour of Exploring the Bizarre. And when previously, Ben, we were talking about Helen Duncan, and this would have been in the 1940s. Now, the spiritualist mediums had made somewhat of a comeback during this time. It always seems like, during war, that naturally people become interested in trying to get some information on, say, their loved ones who are overseas fighting, and she kind of put the scare in the authorities when she started talking and revealing information about sunken ships that had not been revealed publicly. So I can imagine what they were thinking about here. They may not have believed that her sources were of, paranormal nature, but I'm sure they must have thought something. And how do we shut this woman up?
It's exactly. You can imagine the paranoia, the fear that was going around as this information started coming their way. Brigadier Roy Firebrace, who I mentioned previously, head of Army Intelligence, he was also a member of the Society for Psychical Research, and also he knew Aleister Crowley. He was very involved in that sort of thing. And we have a letter. There's a letter actually in existence. His daughter has it. His daughter's still alive, and the letter is. He's a very worried letter. He's writing almost in a form of panic to the War Office, basically saying you've got to do something about this woman, this Scottish woman, Helen Duncan, because of Firebrace, because of his connections to the intelligence world, espionage, and the fact that he was a member of the SPR and he understood the paranormal. He knew all about the things that Jack was talking about the soul and the afterlife and the way that soul spirits can communicate with the living. He said, this is an unpluggable leak. You just got to stop her doing this. And it appears that we don't know for certain, but whether the actual government took him seriously, but I think they must have done because of what happened in 1944. Because in January 1944, she was arrested. There was a police raid on a spiritualist centre in Portsmouth, and she was basically dragged out and was locked up. Now, I expect she probably wasn't expecting the kind of trouble that she got into, because psychic mediums would sometimes be arrested by the police in those days, but they usually got a fine and they were let off. And that's about there is. But before she knew what was happening, she found that her case had been escalated to the Central Criminal Court of London, and she was facing a trial under the Witchcraft Act of 1735. This is this archaic law which had hardly been used for over a century. And was basically, it was just the only reason it hadn't been repealed is because they couldn't get enough MPs in Parliament to bother to put the rubber stamp on it and get rid of it. So why? This is the question. But it was a really serious situation, because if she was found guilty, she could face up to 9 months in jail. It was very worrying for her. And she did. She appeared in court at the Old Bailey in March of 1944, and she was indeed convicted. She was convicted and she was sentenced to the full 9 months. And she was, she was kept as a remand prisoner, so she got a bit of time off, but she was not released until September. And the reason I think this happened is because the government were very, very worried about D-Day. Now, Operation Overlord, the 6th of June, which was the Allied invasion of Europe, this took place under a massive amount of secrecy, but it had to be planned in great detail, which meant a lot of people were in on the secret. And I suspect the reason, the actual impetus, the event which made them decide to prosecute Helen Duncan and get her put away, was in November of 1943. There was an exercise off the coast of Dorset involving one of the landing craft, which you often see in the movies, the ones with the ramp at the front, which comes down as the boat hits the beach and the soldiers come running out. One of those sunk off the coast of Dorset with about 40 troops on board. Everyone drowned. And these were guys, there was 40 men in the spirit world who knew a lot of the secrets of D-Day, who were floating around waiting for an opportunity to come back and, maybe perhaps through no fault of their own, reveal the secrets through Helen Duncan. And it only would take one enemy spy in the room, and careless talk costs lives, etc., etc. And that's it. D-Day, the secrets of D-Day were blown, because the government went to extraordinary lengths to misinform the enemy. They actually planted some disinformation on the enemy through planted documents and things like that, indicating they were going to invade through the south, through Italy. And they had some very, very believable false documents to make the enemy think that, when they were actually planning to invade through Normandy, France, which is what they did. So there was a real there must have been panic in the Whitehall, in the cabinet war rooms, as they said, well, look, let's just concoct a fake case against Helen Duncan, just make up something to get her put away, just so she's out of the way for D-Day. I think that's why they did it.
So, no, was there any indication that that they may have gone to her first and just said, for the love of God and country, shut up? don't talk about this kind of thing, or I mean, you would think that would have been like the proper thing to do to at least give her a chance to.
Yeah.
Don't you think though that bringing this to attention and taking her to the in front of is it the bailiff over there in
Old Bailey
in court? Yeah, Old Bailey. Yeah, okay. Oh, I like Old Bailey, but I like to mix mine with coffee. Anyway, don't you think that would bring more attention to her?
Well, I mean, this is why I think they decided to go for broke. Essentially, it was a bit of a double or quit situation. But I mean, the idea that they could have, why didn't they just simply to approach her, get her to sign the Official Secrets Act, pay her some compensation, and just say, look, do you mind not practicing for the next couple of months? I mean, they could have done that, and the cost would have been less than probably what the trial was. And she was like everyone in the country, she was behind the war effort. She was a patriotic woman. She would have agreed. This is what people are saying now, because there's a campaign to pardon her, and it's being led by a lady called Margaret Hahn, who is Helen's granddaughter, and I've been in touch with her actually. I'm trying to help her as best I can, because this was quite clearly a kangaroo court situation. This was definitely
Ben. How long does your movie run on this? Your little documentary that you did.
I've made several actually. I've made several documentaries about this. One of them, it's about an hour and 40 minutes. The first one.
I think I saw that maybe about a year ago, or is there a new one after that?
There is, yeah. I mean, the one I did, it's a bit amateurish. I don't like the camera work. I'm not very pleased with it. But a lot of other people seem to like it, which is nice. But I did go back.
Hey, listen, it's YouTube, and it's content that we're interested in, and not so much camera work. Although I have to say, you do a decent camera work. I was always wondering how you did it. You said just held the camera in front of you and walked on down the street.
Yeah, I actually went and visited the locations where the main events have happened. And I even got permission to film inside the original Spiritualist Centre in Portsmouth, where Helen was arrested, which today it's someone's flat. It's just a lounge in someone's flat. But they gave me permission to go in and film there, which is really nice of them. And I got some footage from inside the room where it all took place, which is
did they like drag around in front of the press?
Yeah, I mean, it was a big media sensation. The police basically raided the place as if she was some kind of bank robber with a stash. They arrested her. They detained everyone. There was like about a dozen officers involved in this raid, and Helen could have been badly hurt. Actually, I mean, if you've looked into the phenomena of manifestation mediums, you know that if they are disturbed when they're in trance, they can actually be very, very badly injured. Indeed, Helen was in 1956, but she died in 1956, and it followed an accident. Well, it wasn't an accident. It was basically the police killed her. She had a raid in Nottingham. She was doing a séance in Nottingham, and she suffered third-degree burns to her chest as a result of being disturbed in trance.
Can that be documented?
Yes, there's a doctor examined her on the scene. Nothing was actually done. You see, the police wanted to arrest her and take her away, but she had terrible burns to her chest, and she died about 2 weeks later.
Well, that's Tim. Would you say that's one of the best evidential proofs of this type of phenomena?
Oh yeah, definitely. But as Ben says, I mean, there's been a lot of other cases, especially when a medium is like right in the middle of, say, producing ectoplasm, and I know some scientists had attempted to get samples, and it would cause like a lot of pain and injuries to the medium. I think one of them described it as the ectoplasm snapped back into their body so hard that they were physically thrown backwards against the wall of the spirit booth that they were in.
Yeah, this is why they have to have peace and quiet. This is why the doors are locked. This is why the lights are dimmed. It's not so they can hide wires and props and dummies. That's not why they do it. They do it because the medium in trance has to be in that environment for their own safety. And so Helen was put in enormous danger. They could have killed her in that raid in 1944. But they wanted to.
Yeah, I was just wondering, Jack, have you heard of any psychics or mediums over here that have been persecuted to such an extent?
No, it hasn't happened in a long time. I mean, they're and not that are going through that. I mean, that's well. I want to say something because you talk about how they're snapped back in and stuff like that. So my thought just was they're manifesting these things. So is the ectoplasmic material actually part of their own system and not necessarily a spiritual? I mean, it's a manifestation of a spiritual being or whatever. But that would tell me the ectoplasm is actually part of that person.
Yeah,
their own spiritual being.
It's
so
a piss.
Speak.
It's piss.
So that's why right. So trying to take part of it is going to do damage to them.
Yeah, it does seem to be like that. I mean, it's a very, very delicate situation, and it's almost as if a part of them comes out,
that's
maybe part of the etheric body. Yeah, and it's
right.
Because it does seem to be like it's not actually the ectoplasm isn't actually the spirit. It's like an image of the spirit, like a 3D printing thing. Really, it creates this image.
Right. But as far as what you guys are talking about with do we have any more recent examples of what we call witches here, even up in Salem, up in more modern times in the 1950s, 60s, they were still being persecuted up there. Even then, they were being arrested. They were being, jailed, trying to be chased out of town for their businesses, in a not so obvious way. But you
did have a witch up there who was the Witch of Salem, and she was best friends with the mayor.
Yes, yeah, and that's what helped them kind of get in eventually up there. But it took many years. They were still being kind of, even within the United States, persecuted to a point of, well, we don't want you in this area. We don't want you around here. They try to make them move their businesses out and stuff like that, make it difficult for them. So not so much as necessarily arresting them, although that did happen, but more of just kind of making it very difficult for them to run their businesses. So
well, there are some towns that have banned any kind of witchcraft, not witchcraft, but also psychic readings and all. In fact, there was a story, didn't get very much attention, of a little town not far from Washington, D.C. recently, where there was a bookstore and they were doing free readings. And the city council came after them and made them stop doing the readings on their threat of being fined and so forth, because they said that it would lead to demons coming out.
Yeah, and that still goes on. I mean, that goes on in a lot of places.
And I figured they're already sitting on the city council already. So
that's the point, isn't it?
Well, Philadelphia. In Philadelphia, it's a big city. There actually was there was a crackdown using a very, very, very archaic bylaw that was suddenly brought. They decided to enforce all of a sudden a few years ago, where the city council officials went and shut down a load of fortune tellers, mediums, tarot readers, all over the city. It was a really, really bad situation, and I heard about it on the Skeptic forum, and the skeptics were cheering them on, things like that. I was quite upset by this, but
Philadelphia used to be a very a popular town as far as people who were into, I wouldn't call it so much maybe spiritism and lucky lottery numbers and dream books. There must have been 15 or 20 dream books that you could actually buy on the newsstand there. The night before the races at Churchill Down or wherever they race, around there. And I don't know, but that was quite a few years ago. I don't know if that's still going on. And Mr. Silverman ran one of the big bookstores there that sold the cult books and all. And of course, they just passed away. Eventually, they had run the stores, and the family passed it down from one generation to another, making the talismans and selling herbs and oils and things like that. You can still find quite a few of these in the Spanish neighborhoods, but not so much in Middle America. anymore.
We're actually building them up around here in the Albany, New York area. We're getting more and more of those types of shops around here, which is interesting.
That's nice. Well, it's nice that that's happened. I mean, there's a lot of different cultures in North America, perhaps more of a variety than you get in Britain, because you get like little villages and towns where people believe in Adam and Eve and things like that. But in a big city, it's. I mean, I've never been to the United States. I'm not American, but. I mean, for me, there's still an issue of human rights here. I mean, I made this point to the skeptics on the forum, and I did explain. I said, look, you see, you're basically telling the government to go in and enforce the will of the skeptics on people who might not necessarily be skeptics, and that's not fair. I mean, you could, if you're not willing to persuade someone, it's like you're stepping in and saying the law will force you to do this. We'll use the state to basically compel you to do what we tell you. And I said, that's not fair. And the skeptics, well, it's perfectly fair, they said. You know?
Of course it is to them. Yeah.
But these would be the same guys, though, that they'd get all upset and butthurt if, say, like in Kansas or someplace like that, they enforced teaching, say, like creationism in the schools, and passed a law to that would be the only thing. Then, no, that's not fair.
Of course.
Yeah.
Of course, in that case, it's the other way around. See, it's not doing what they want, so they turn against it. It's a very sort of one-way libertarianism they practice.
Yeah.
Of course, now
I hear that.
A lot of, here
we're getting more of that around here these days.
Yeah. Here you have a lot of, I guess, what we would call small fringe religions that you might not find in the. Well, you have spiritualism there in England, which is, of course, I don't know how many members of a spiritualist church do you think there are today over there, Ben?
Oh, there's over 100 churches in the country. There's two main organizations, and so it's still. I mean, it's declining somewhat, but it's still popular. Yeah. I mean, there used to be two in Oxford. I think there's just one church in Oxford now, but I do go along sometimes.
Well, the Psychic News, which is the big glossy magazine that we advertise in, they are merging with Two Worlds, and both of those publications. They go back, I don't know to almost 80 or 90 years now, and Psychic News I remember reading when I was 15 years old or something like that, and they got a really big glossy magazine now. In fact, they did have an article on Helen Duncan recently, and I mean, it's a really flashy looking magazine that. It may be the only one I think today in the world. I can't really think of a printed magazine per se anymore that delves into the psychic. You've got the 14 Times, of course, but they kind of like sit on the fence as far as most of this goes, and half the articles that they do are kind of tongue in cheek and cheek and tongue or whatever.
They don't like me either. 14 Times they said I was a bit of a loony, so they wrote about me in one of their articles.
All of us in this field are a little out there.
That's right. There you go.
But what was Charles Fort? He was a big loony.
I know. I mean, he would turn in his grave if you could see the modern FT. He really would.
Well, I've been to his grave. It's not far from here. It's up near. It's in the rural Albany Cemetery. In fact, we were thinking of having a little picnic up there this year, but it never materialized. We may do it next year. But the cemetery is haunted. So we've had the MIB lady, Claudia Cunningham. She's kind of our regional associate up in that part of the state. And they've had all kind of mysterious black cars being seen in the gravel road, and it'll drive down a gravel road and disappear entirely. And one of the presidents that's not very well known is buried there. And every once in a while, a whole caravan of cars will appear and circle his where he's buried, his monument, and then disappear. I mean, and people are seen flying over the tombstones dressed in pajamas and carrying candles at night. and then there are these big dogs that like will growl at you, but then when you turn around, they will have disappeared. I mean, it's a freaky cemetery. So Charles Ford is continuing his research with all this weird phenomena.
He's in the right place, isn't he?
He's in the right place for sure. In fact, there is a video on our YouTube channel, which is Mr. UFO's Secret Files, of me and Claudia in the cemetery, and there's some spooky things that happen while we're there, and maybe next year, well, this year actually, later on when the weather gets better, if it ever does, we might have our little outing and excursion there, and hopefully some phenomena may appear. In fact, we heard that the State House where the governor resides has got a ghost in it, and that made the paper. I mean, people don't seem to shy away from this as much as they used to. Wouldn't you say that, Jack? I mean, is there a little bit more?
Yeah, I agree with that. Actually, they give a tour at the mansion there every year for that. And they talk the ghost tour, and they talk about that spirit that's there.
Well, why don't we go up there and do a little bit of investigation of our own? Maybe get a little publicity for the show in your groups and.
If they let us in, that'd be great.
Hey, we're
but there's a lot of places. I mean, there's a lot of places around.
We're the media. Governor Como could use a little help at this point. I'll tell you that. He might have to stuff the ballot box with the ghosts. I mean, I'm sure Donald Trump would say that 1 million ghosts voted in the last election. That's how he.
Maybe 3 million. Yeah, maybe extra 3 million.
Three times each. Yeah. So.
Yeah, that's right.
They used to do that,
didn't they?
If you got a spirit hand, you can always just pull the lever without anybody even realizing it, right?
Hey, I used to. I remember
if you're a
lot
Russian,
of dead people used to vote.
If you're a Russian ghost, I mean, all hell breaks loose. That's for sure. Cutting me off.
Yep, that's right. It's time to cut you off there, Tim. Cut you off at the ectoplasm. And we'll be right back with more Exploring the Bizarre.
Now back to Exploring the Bizarre with two of the most electrifying researchers in the paranormal, your hosts, Timothy Beckley and Tim Swartz.
Final segment of Exploring the Bizarre, Tim, so I guess we better get right into it before we run out of time. So, Jack, during the break, Tim had asked you about whether or not your group has done any UFO investigations, and what was your answer?
The group hasn't, no. But unrelated to even doing paranormal stuff, me and some friends of mine, we had a fishing camp up in the wilderness of Quebec. You had to fly in to get to the camp. And I saw some very odd things a couple times up there. Actually, the six of us did. And we weren't drinking either, just so you know. But we saw, I mean, there was a big electric storm. And this is how far up north we are. We were near the Labrador border.
Ooh.
So further up in Labrador, there was a big electrical storm, and we're just watching. You can see satellites. It's so clear up there. You see the satellites go by at night. But there's an electrical storm going on, and we're just watching. All of a sudden, we see this one thing come shooting in towards that storm. Now, it just was like a bright light in the sky, and it stopped, and it started gyrating above the storm. Then another one came in from the east, another one from the west, and then one came straight down from space. That's the only way I could say it. And they gyrated around this storm. And this went on for an hour. And we're just sitting there watching it out on our dock and going like, what the heck? What are they? We're trying to figure out what they are. And then we see one take off, another took off. And we just actually kind of got tired of watching it. We're like, I'm going to bed. I never saw anything like it. These weren't satellites. They weren't Skylab or whatever it was at the time. You could actually even see that go by at night, and the space station and stuff. But I don't know what these things were, but they're nothing I think we set up there. I'll tell you that. I don't know what they are. At least nothing that our government tells us about, or whatever government tells us about. But it almost seemed like maybe they were drawing energy from this electrical storm. That's what it seemed like to me anyway. So I don't know what to make of that, And I saw that actually happen a couple times over probably, within a 4-year span, and it's just really unusual. So I don't know what to make of it. And these things come in so fast, it's like boom, 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 and then they're gone. Well, we don't have anything that moves that fast that I'm aware of. So,
Tim and I are working on a book about some of the negative effects of UFOs. We call it hostility, but I'm not sure if that's the proper term. There's one incident that got a lot of publicity up in Canada when it took place, and it's actually the 50th anniversary. It's an encounter that took place at the Falcon Lake, and there was a fellow who was let me see. He was I guess an auto mechanic, and he would spend his spare time going up near Falcon Lake and looking for deposits of silver and quartz.
Okay.
And a very, very remote area. And he was up there one day and he saw two objects in the sky. I think one was a cylindrical shaped craft and the other, what are your typical disco, a domed disco type UFO and all.
Okay.
And that one, the domed object, landed not too far from him, and a port or a door or a gangway of some sort opened, and he got himself pretty close. I guess curiosity got the best of him, and he walked right up to the craft to peer inside, and he got zapped by something, laser. We don't know what they call it from where they come from, but something zapped the hell out of him, and he ended up in the hospital. And his shirt that he was wearing was kind of destroyed. In fact, it left an imprint on his chest. The shirt itself had burned off, and there was this a grid system, and very, very painful. And the story did get a lot of attention at the time, and he passed away, maybe I guess 7 or 8 years ago, at a nice old age. But his son, still has some of the garments that he was wearing, and they have coming out with a book, and pretty well. I've seen some of the government documents. The Canadian mounted police investigated it, and the Canadian Defense Department, and they could never come up, with an explanation for this. Of course, the skeptics say, "Oh, it was a hoax." I don't know whether he was supposed to have taken a blowtorch to his chest or not, but the guy certainly had the pattern. You remember the photo, Tim, right? I mean, it's a very popular picture. I mean, it's been used, and
oh yeah. I can't believe that somebody would just to go and take a blowtorch or whatever it was and blowtorch, burn that kind of pattern into his chest.
You tried to do that to me at the last picnic, so I don't know.
Carol couldn't hold you down, and you just kept running away.
I let her hold me down. That's okay. Hey, Ben, what's going on in Rendlesham Forest these days?
Well, in August, there's going to be a big event, actually, because we're getting together to do some camping and things like that.
Are you going to be allowed to go to that one?
Well, there's been some efforts to try and stop us, but basically it's public land. It's Forestry Commission land, and we're not breaking any rules, so they're not going to try and stop us. But there's all kinds of.
You got to question Colonel Holt again and turn off your camera.
Oh well, Colonel Holt won't be there. No, Colonel,
that is the greatest. That is the greatest incident I've ever heard of you or anybody else pulling. He asked Tim, the story how he asked Colonel Holt about, I guess, Larry Warren, and Colonel Holt told him to shut the camera off, and he shut the camera off. But then when he turned it back on, he just repeated the story. Then it goes up like that. Yeah.
Colonel Holt, yeah, he and Larry Warren are now complete loggerheads, and obviously there's Colonel Holt dedicates a lot of his time when he's on stage now to saying what he thinks of Larry Warren, which is a shame because I'd rather hear what Colonel Holt's own experience was and what he had, what he saw, because I'm sure he's telling the truth about his own experience.
Yeah, but of course he's peeved at Larry because Larry was the whistleblower here, you know. For all the dirt that Larry takes, if it wasn't for him, there would be no Linda Moulton Howe or Pennington or John Burroughs. I mean, Larry was the one that brought the story to the attention of the world. And kind of got screwed, if anybody did, because the fellow who took the information sold it for, I don't know, what, £10,000 or something, right?
Well, yeah, but there's a new documentary coming out called Capel Green, which is all about Larry Warren and his story, which will hopefully set the record straight. But I mean, it's true. I mean, if it hadn't been for him, and it was his testimony that triggered the whole investigation process and the eventual government, the government were forced to admit a few things. And this, because it happened so soon after the event, it was very easy, unlike with Roswell, where there was a 30-year gap. Because if it hadn't been for Larry, basically, we still probably 30 years later, someone would have said something, and we said, "Oh, what? Back all those years ago, there was this thing in Suffolk. Oh, what's that?" And we wouldn't know half as much about it as we do now.
Well, you know, there is a new book out, which I've read a couple of chapters on that Philip Mantle published on Rendlesham Forest, but the author is nowhere to be found.
Oh, that's Andrew Pike. Yeah. Well, he's. I think he's got problems in his own life he has to deal with. So, he can't. He can no longer publish the book.
The book came out, and he's never done a show or been interviewed or anything else.
No, I asked him myself.
We wanted to have him on because,
I've got a copy here, actually, the Rendlesham file. I've got a copy right in front of me. It's a great big book, huge book.
I have the PDF of it, but what good is it if you can't get the author to promote a book? You know, I mean, that's about the only way you sell anything these days.
Well, I hope whatever it is, Mr. Pike gets it sorted out, and I don't know what it is. It's something in his own life. I hope he gets it sorted out. It's an interesting book. I think it makes a lot of errors, but it's worth reading. It's a good historical document, I think.
Well, how many books have been written now on Bentwaters?
Oh, there's about a dozen. There's probably Left Eastgate is the best one, I would say. It's the best selling one.
We published the first book on Bentwaters here in the United States. Jenny Randalls wrote From Out of the Blue.
Yeah, that was the original one.
That was before. I think that was before even Eastgate, and it was published in paperback, but by that time, the cloud in the UFO publishing field had kind of dwindled, and where you used to be able to sell 150,000 books, you wouldn't sell anywhere near that amount today. You know, I mean, it's really hit
her. That's a classic. Sky Crash, wasn't it? Sky Crash. That's a classic.
Sky Crash. Well, that was the original one. That Dottie.
Dot Street. Yeah, Brenda Butler.
I hear from her every once in a while on Facebook.
She's lovely. She is. Yeah.
Yeah. I tried to get her on the show. We dig deep here to get guests that haven't been on a program either previously or people that have been reclusive and have been trying to stay away from the public eye for the great number of years, and we've been successful. We're the voice of the paranormal in the United States. Wouldn't you say, Tim?
The voice?
Yes, you can see.
Yeah.
We have Tim Beckley and Tim Schwartz in the U.S. and Howard Hughes in the UK.
The Unexplained, that's a great show.
Yeah, indeed, yeah.
Well, and you're right though, Tim. I mean, we do try to find people that haven't had a chance to be on other programs. Either they've been overlooked or whatever, and those are the people we like to get on.
Yeah.
Hey, Tim, have you guys ever had Tom Conwell on your show? He's a ufologist. Yeah, he's a ufologist here near me. Actually, he's out of the Hose area.
What's the name again?
Tom Conwell. Conwell.
Oh,
He's on Facebook. He's written a few different books on UFOs and stuff here in the United States. So
yeah, we had a fellow on who wrote a book about UFO sightings over Maine, which always intrigued me because there was an incident that took place there in the 1960s where this fellow actually shot at a UFO, and he could hear the bullets ricocheting off of the. That was, I think, Tim, in Bangor.
Yes,
which is an appropriate name for hitting a UFO.
yeah, Bangor.
Bangor. Yeah.
Hey, I wanted to ask Jack a question here before we run out of time. And have you ever gone to a scene? Your group.
Right.
Really not expecting that much. I know that, the people have to fill out all the form and everything like that.
Right.
You go into it, you're like, yeah, well, this is just.
Well, I usually go into that way anyway, but yeah.
Yeah, but then it just turns out to be like, wow, this is like the most incredible situation that we have ever seen before.
Yeah, there actually was. There's been a few of those, and one was a Springfield Mass case, where I really just thought the guy was really having some issues, and wow, we experienced everything he did, and
really?
that was the one with the shadow figure and everything else, and it's like I got grabbed by something there on the calf of my leg. That was a crazy. We heard somebody walking through the one downstairs, which was a guy's apartment in his mother's house. Somebody walked down the stairs from the kitchen, walk all the way through the room, and there's nobody there. Nothing was on the DVR cameras. Our two investigators who were in the downstairs section heard it. Nobody walked through there, but you could hear a woman humming, and the investigators heard it, and one didn't. And that was a crazy one. That was like, wow, this is a real. True haunting. I mean, something's going on there, and we were able to figure out it wasn't anything serious, at least anyway. But we experienced everything he did, and I would say the Constitution was another one where we had a lot of experiences on that ship, and a lot of different things, weird things happening, and weren't really expecting that. I mean, it's like it's a Navy ship. Come on, really? I mean, but. We validated a lot of stuff for the crew that said, yeah, we're experiencing this and that and the other. I was like, wow, holy, you're right. So yeah, I could say there's been quite a few like that. Yeah.
Well, okay. Now, when people bring you into some of these cases, do some of them expect you to put the activity to rest? They want you to come in there and it's like, hey, get rid of all this stuff. We don't want it anymore.
Yeah, that's what they do, and we actually work to do that. And it's not easy. There's, like I always tell people, because it's a combination of things. It's a combination of, okay, there is activity going on, and what I've found based on the information people give us and working with these people is a lot of it has to do, I believe, with things in their past they have not dealt with that draws a lot of this crazy energy to them. Okay, it's like the moth to the flame. Okay, and you have to help them work at straightening out their lives in order to keep this activity away. And there's things we can do. We do different prayer things. We do saging. We do a lot of things and we teach them some of that stuff and tell them reconnect with whatever belief system you believe in. I'm not going to tell you it's only the Catholic way or it's only this way or that way. Hey, everybody believes their own stuff. Connect to that, go for it, and keep in touch, with that spiritual side of yourself.
Well, that's why many years ago we decided to call our little publishing company Inner Light Publications, because you must follow the path that leads you to whatever end of the rainbow you're looking for. Yeah,
right.
Yeah,
exactly. And that's what I tell these people. And these people are people who have problems, and there's things in their past they've never told anybody that they'll tell you. And these are bad things, the bad things that happened to them, and they never dealt with them. And I really believe that draws this kind of crazy negative energy to them, and I've seen people, their lives turn around because they'll listen to you to go see somebody, talk to somebody, deal with these issues, and then we'll go in and we'll do our part to try to help get things quiet, and that takes months. That's not something you do in one day. This takes months to do. We have to keep going back a lot of times, and it's not a one and done. Like I always tell them, there's no magic wand I can wave and make everything go away. It doesn't work that way.
Now, are there any kind of cases that you refuse to handle?
No, not yet. Not yet. I mean, if I do know of some friends of mine who are real exorcists, and they've told me how to identify those real serious types of cases, and they've told me you don't want to do that yourself. If you ever do, come to them, and they know what to do, and they don't charge either, but they know how to help these people, these types.
Now,
of things.
you have two organizations there that you're part of. One is I
have many organizations.
Well, no, I'm looking at Spirits of New England and San Diego Ghost Hunters.
Yep.
Would they handle this type of work differently?
No, the two teams. I mean, our team, Spirits of New England, San Diego Ghost Hunters, are very similar. Although my friends out in San Diego, they don't do too many client investigations. They do a lot of historical places. So that's a little bit different. And they run like events where people can come and learn how to investigate and things like that. So that's a little bit different. But they're all good people, and they do try to help other people at times when they can, even out in San Diego.
Well, speaking of learning,
yes,
we want our listeners here in the last few minutes of the show to learn how they can get in touch with both of you gentlemen. So, Jack, why don't you tell us where we can go to if we want to speak with you?
All right. Well, the best way to get a hold of me actually probably is on Facebook. You can look up just Jack Kenna, and you'll find me right there on Facebook. And just message me there. I actually even have a phone number people can reach me at if they really want to talk or they need some assistance or just have some questions. And you can actually call me at 518-330-0277. It's kind of my business.
I see we both contribute to Paranormal Underground. We've had a number of articles published. Published in there. That's correct. Yes. And you have how many books now out?
I have currently I have my one book that's out right now called Hauntings, Ghosts, and Demons, which is available on Amazon.com. And I have a book coming out this June. It should be out on the 28th called Paranormal. What did they end up calling my publisher called? Paranormal Research. Yes, Paranormal Research. Building a comprehensive team or something. I can't remember what they ended up calling it.
Comprehensive guide to building a strong team. By Schiffer, which is one of our favorite publishers. They put out some really nice looking books. Ben, I want to go and watch more of your shows on YouTube. How do I find you?
Oh, the best way to get a hold of me is via my website, which is called Hospital Porters Against the New World Order. It's HPANWL.
Right on. Yeah. Even if there are only two of them currently.
That's right. Yeah. Hopefully gather more of them. But you don't have to be a hospital porter against the New World Order to potentially be there. Yeah. The website actually has a lot of different bits to it. In my YouTube channel, as you mentioned, my own radio shows because I host my own shows, and I've got books like Jack. I've written a couple of books. There's one called Roswell Rising, a novel of disclosure, and Roswell Revealed, a world after disclosure, which is all about the UFO crash retrieval exopolitics disclosure issue. They're fictional books, but they're imaginary stories about the very, very serious subject. So you can get a copy of that. They're £10 each on Amazon.co.uk or Amazon.com, and you can pick one of those up. And there's a new one coming out. Probably won't get it done before Jack's new book, but I will still hopefully get my new book out sometime this year. I'm looking at.
Well, and if we want to, I know people will want to see the Helen Duncan story. If we go to Google, that's the easiest way. What do we type in? What's the name of it?
It's just put in her name. It's probably Helen Duncan, Helen and Duncn. You'll come across various videos and websites, including my own productions. I've got a high quality studio version of my original Helen Duncan movie. So
I might go and watch that. It's either that or professional wrestling. I don't know which one I want to watch.
Oh, come on, Jim, there's no choice here. But honestly, it's a pretty obvious choice. But if anyone's in the vicinity of Manchester, England, on Saturday evening, you can come to the Rixton with Glazebrook Community Centre, where I am doing a live talk about Helen Duncan, so you can actually come and meet me and shake my hand. And,
why don't you have somebody tape that so you can send it around? Post
I think they are. I think the organisers of the event are actually
wonderful. We love to sneak in and see some of these private shows, even on YouTube, even if only 45 people have watched it or something. I mean, it's like
it's the Weird Weekend, the Weird Weekend North. It is. That's the event. So
and Tim and I have been very busy, have we not, Tim?
Oh yes, always busy. We got the. Have we come up with a title yet for the UFO hostility? I think it's I've upset Tim about that. I'm sorry, Tim, but we do. We've got the book about hostile UFOs coming out sometime soon. You're breaking up a little bit there, Tim, on this. But
okay. Well.
Okay. Now I can hear you. Go ahead. Go ahead.
I was slouching in the chair. The Weird Winged Wonders. That's our book on the flying cryptid creatures and hovering aliens that can be seen outside your office building or something at a quick glance. And that's an excellent book. And then we have another book. Was it Hitler's Secret Societies?
Yeah, well, we'll have to leave it at that, Tim, because we are out of time.
Well, never out of time. Remember our YouTube channel, Mr. UFO's Secret Files. Almost 200 videos up there now and growing fast.
You've been listening to Exploring the Bizarre with hosts Timothy Beckley and Tim Swartz. They're taking back the night by jetting non-stop across the cosmos in search of the truly bizarre and totally unexplained, with you as their co-pilot. Thursday nights at 7 p.m. Pacific, 10 p.m. Eastern, on the KCOR Digital Radio Network. For more information on Exploring the Bizarre and hosts Timothy Beckley and Tim Swartz, check out their KCOR Digital Radio Network page. Follow their YouTube channel at MRUFO 1100, exploring the bizarre.